So I thought, what better way to start 2021 off than with another tier list? This time we're rating funny things my dad did. But before we get started, make sure you assault that like button. Alright, so my dad was a really funny guy, so let's get into some stories and see how they stack up on the tier list. This first one was a few years ago on a night when my dad invited me to go to dinner with him. Except we didn't go to dinner, and instead we stopped at a 7-Eleven. And he got out of the car and met with some guy and came back with this little bag of what I assume was cocaine. So, he had to test it because that's just what you do, right? But the bag was like this little shitty piece of plastic, so once he opened it, all the cocaine started to spill out. So he had me hold it so it wouldn't spill. But he was upset about something. I guess the cocaine didn't put enough holes in his brain or whatever, so he got out of the car again and started arguing with the guy. So the situation is that I'm sitting there holding a bag of cocaine, like half covered in the stuff, while my dad is arguing with a drug dealer in front of the 7-Eleven. So I'm going to stick this one in as like a B, because it's pretty funny to be implicated in a felony, especially since this situation, it's just like, every time someone gets caught with drugs and they're like, I was just holding it for a friend. It was like that, but real, like when your dog actually eats your homework. All right, this next one was when I was 8. I was in the truck with my dad, and he had been drinking. We lived in a small town, and if you ever lived in a small town, you probably have railroad tracks that come right through the middle of it, and you have to stop and wait like 5 minutes for the train to go by. But as we came up to the train tracks, my dad didn't want to do that. He didn't want to wait. So he said, "We're racing the train!" And then he hit the gas pedal so he could get across the tracks before the train went by. And I saw my short life flash before my eyes, and I realized I was going to die. Now, I didn't die, obviously, but I'm still going to put this one as like a C, because 8-year-olds facing their mortality is pretty funny if you think about it, but just not quite on the same level as committing a felony. Okay, this next one is about video games. My dad always hated them growing up. One time, he hit my Nintendo 64 with a hammer for no reason. But one really funny memory is one day he told me I couldn't play video games anymore. So I went into my room and I was reading a Nintendo Power magazine, and he got really mad because I was still doing something involving video games. So he grabbed my magazine, and I don't know really how to describe it. He like took a bite out of it, and then he threw the reading lamp across the room. So that part wasn't that funny, but the really funny thing is that he hated video games so much, but now I basically play video games for a living. So that's definitely going up there as an A. Okay, so it was like my 20th birthday, and at that time I was living in an apartment that my dad owned. So he had the key to it. And for that birthday, he gave me a chocolate cake and some black combat boots. And I like cake, and obviously I'm like a sociopath, so black combat boots like fit that pretty well. But then I got home one day, and my cake and boots weren't there. So I asked him, "Hey, did you take my cake and boots that you gave me?" And he said he returned the boots because obviously I didn't want them because I hadn't worn them yet. Which was weird because it'd only been like 2 days since I got them. And he said he took the cake because obviously I didn't want it because I was eating it. But the thing was, I already had a cake from my other friends that I was eating first. And as hard as I try, I just can't eat an entire birthday cake like every day. But I mean, it is a pretty funny story, but it really did kind of suck because I like cake, and it makes me mad when people steal my cake. Okay, so this next one happened when I was about 8 or so. Again, when I lived in Idaho on a small ranch, and we had chickens and we used them for eggs. And I liked those chickens. They were kind of like pets, But my dad liked to cut their heads off with an axe, and he made me watch. And I really didn't like seeing my pets' heads get cut off with an axe. But the funny part is that if he didn't cut their heads off, then we wouldn't be able to eat. So the lesson I learned from this is that my survival is contingent on the suffering of others. And that's a pretty funny lesson for an 8-year-old to learn. So I think that belongs right up there alongside facing my mortality. All right, so one thing my dad liked to do was go to restaurants with me and get really drunk and hit on the waitresses. And this resulted in us getting banned from like 4 or 5 restaurants. And it was pretty embarrassing. So it is funny when I think back on it. I was going to put this next to having my cake stolen, but then I realized that not being able to eat at several restaurants means potentially not eating a lot of cakes. So I do have to put this one below it. It just makes sense. Raking leaves. My dad was obsessed with yard work when I was a kid for some reason, but he wasn't the one who liked doing it. He liked to make me do it. And I have this one memory of waking up at like 9 in the morning on a weekend and then being forced to rake leaves all day and into the night. So it was like dark and we weren't finished yet, but he made us keep going anyway. And this really taught me the value of hard work. No, just kidding. This taught me that hard work gains you nothing, and anyone who demands it of you is just trying to take advantage of you. That's one of the reasons I decided to play video games for a living. So this is going to go right up here. Okay, this one was a few years ago. I was actually streaming on Twitch with my friend Tech on New Year's Eve, and my dad stopped by at like midnight. And he was really drunk, probably, and he just kind of bust in and started screaming and firing off his 9mm. Actually, I have a clip of that one.
Oh, God.
Oh, God, what the fuck is wrong with you?
God.
Fucking spaz? No.
Oh my God.
Everybody's awake now. Yeah, no shit. So obviously Tech and my dad were having a good time. So that kind of outweighs whatever laws we were violating by firing a weapon into a neighborhood. I think that one just belongs right up there with other funny felonies I've been a part of. But maybe not quite as funny as cocaine bags, since my fingerprints weren't on the evidence this time. Alright, so a while ago my dad said he was leaving, but he didn't really say where to, and I haven't heard from him in like 2 years. I don't even know if he's still alive. So that's pretty funny, I think. It taught me that people in your life could just disappear one day. So I'm going to put this one right there with facing my mortality and learning the universal law of suffering. Okay, last one. This one is about the time I came out to my dad as a gay dragon. This was in high school, I think, and he was mad at me because I didn't have a girlfriend, and he said something like, "What are you, gay?" And I said, "Yes, but also dragons." And he kind of didn't know what to think about that, but then he said, "Don't ever tell anyone that again." And I laughed at him because I'd been on the internet as a gay dragon for like years at that point. But what's really funny about it is I pretty much make a living off of talking about dragon dicks. Yep, playing video games and talking about dragon knots. So yeah, that's pretty much the tier list. Thought I'd just share that with you all. Tell me what you think in the comments, and make sure you violate that like button. Anyway, see y'all later and have a wonderful day.